Good.
Jeff, I have no idea what time it is. Do you?
4 minutes.
We have 4 minutes or
Yeah.
4 after?
No, we got 4 minutes. You're in charge. You start whenever you want.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
See you, thank you.
Can you hold on?
Hey, about time.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
You want?
No, he's been killing it.
Oh.
Yeah, he's been killing it. I'm rich.
I know. I always be going this way.
Do you have anybody left?
Make sure a dime of it. I did already.
There's no race there.
There's no race for 2 weeks because of the Olympics. Because it's on Channel 10.
I could have been double.
Did they have racing in the Olympics?
No, but because...
Oh, I just wondered.
No,
Terry,
Yes, but not hard.
Terry,
Yes.
Oh, the team.
the Channel 10 has, whatever, CBS, NBC, whatever
Are
it
you
is.
talking about NASCAR?
They have that.
Yes, we, oh yeah.
Let me tell you what happened to me.
Okay.
First of all, I've never been to NASCAR. Right? Never been.
Oh, well, you should go. It's
My
a
dad,
great
my
experience.
dad took me to,
I'd go with you anytime.
to a race car, you know, when I was like 8 years old. So this priest of ours called me up and said, hey, I've got tickets for like April, or August 6, 7, 8, whatever they are.
Are the glad?
When?
Oh!
And I said, how much are they? I'll reimburse you for money. He said, nope, I'll wait get two so I can take somebody with me. So I'm going to the Saturday race. His tickets come with like headphones and a laptop or whatever.
Oh, yeah, so you can see
So
the
you can
whole
watch
race.
it. And a big screen in front of you so you can watch it.
Yeah. You'll need the headphones because it's a road course and you're not gonna see that much. Wherever you are, you may see that much and that's it. And they're over there. So to keep track of who's in the lead on that, those headphones.
So do I have to keep the back one?
No, it's not that redneck anymore.
It's in New York, you're not allowed to smoke around tobacco products. So you're going to skip church and go to the Sunday race?
No, I can go to Saturday. Keep your early.
Well, we'll take your ticket.
Other people are going.
You'll see some of the Xfinity drivers.
Look at me here.
No, no, I'm sorry.
A couple of drivers in the Xfinity race.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
I'm looking forward to doing that.
Oh, yes. Very fun.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay.
The only place
How are you?
you haven't really right.
Did you have a good birthday?
Talladega's fine. Don't take your pills.
Sometimes this week I'll just do it for a cake.
Yeah, that little
Yeah.
So touched. And Johnny stayed his prayers on the lawnmower.
I have a friend
We
of
got
mine.
back with things last evening.
My son came in this morning like at 2 o'clock. He said, Dad, I'm going to church. I never did church here, so I'm going to church with you. I went home. They came with the grandkids.
Oh, yeah.
I said, I know.
We used to go to Daytona in the summer. How many years?
John is saying his prayers on the lawnmower.
Parking lot.
I already gave that. The one that just pulled in, she's asking. Oh, I already gave it.
We learned every year we learn. That Richard Petty.
Came down this. They came down the street this way and ran across and.
Good idea. It's too sunny over there. Too sunny. Yeah, great. I could have gone in front of you two, but no, that's not very nice.
That's okay.
You
You can come here. Oh, Lori's over there? Well, Lori's good.
Well, she's doing it.
Yeah. Miss Lori, that's quite a chair.
Good morning, you two. Sorry. Got caught up in my man's work stuff that you did left.
No. I understand. Okay.
What?
Enjoy, Mom. Enjoy the ride.
Got it down now.
I thought he was bell. You all set with everything you need. You appear to be up and running. However, right. The appearance does not be deceiving. Yeah. You never know. I never know.
By the way, you're very colorful.
I don't know. We're running around. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, Henry. Good head shot.
Yes, Dan.
Good shot.
That's a lot. It's a
You fall asleep.
Yeah, we haven't started yet. So.
That's it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Well, that's the opening music. Sing it.
Good morning. Welcome to worship this morning. It is good to be with you. It is good to be back with our brother Johnny, and it is good to be on this beautiful morning of God's creation as we gather together for worship. Friends, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Would you join together with me in our responsive opening prayer in your bulletin? The foolish say there is no God. We are alone, on our own.
Together to declare the glory of God in our lives.
The foolish say, it is your life. You are accountable to no one.
Together, strengthened by the Spirit, trusting that Christ dwells in our hearts.
The foolish say, everything I have is mine. I owe nothing to anyone.
Together to praise the one who calls us to serve others in love.
Would you join me in our unison prayer of confession? Wisdom's heart, deep within, we know how we have failed to be your people. Our ardent hearts are closed to the love of Christ. Our lust for more and more blocks the fullness of your grace from transforming our lives. Our trust in the powers of the world reveals our foolish nature. Have mercy, God of every generation. Pour out the rich blessings of forgiveness on our heart's souls. Feed us with heaven's bread, so we might be nourished by your gentleness. Shape us as your people, and restore us to faithful living, as we seek to follow our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, in service to everyone. The wideness of God's mercy, the range of God's forgiveness, the infinite love of God, the heart of hope, which is never empty. All these gifts are ours, as God restores us to the fullness of life meant for us.
Grounded in love, rooted in discipleship, to offer ourselves in service to others, recognizing the limitless grace which is ours to share in Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Would you join together in singing, O love, how deep, how broad, how high? We'll sing 3 verses together.
She said, "Can you say that again?" And I said, "No." So I was talking to Kevin about missing one line, and he says, "You know, it gives you the opportunity to pray that last line, whatever you want it to be." So Kevin convinced me that was intentional on my part. Seriously. A reading from John's Gospel. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw the large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test Philip, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. Then one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a little boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place. So they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." And so they gathered them up. And from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is come into the world." And when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him and force to make him their king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea and got into a boat and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because of the strong wind that was blowing, and they had rowed about 3 to 4 miles. They saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. And he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." And when they wanted to take him into the boat, immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. This is the gospel of the Lord, or the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. O Holy Spirit of God, take my words and speak through them. Take our minds and think through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much for your prayers in my absence, for me and for my uncle. I will tell you that this cancer has no cure. So at some point, it will take his life from here, and he will enter the other life. And he seems to be fine with that, better than I am, actually, with that. So keep him in your prayers. It's an easy name to remember. It's Johnny, because he and I share the name of his father, my grandfather, who's also named Johnny. So, again, thank you so very much. When people have told me before I could feel your prayers, I wondered often what that felt like. Now I no longer have to wonder what that feels like. I have felt them, so thank you all so very much. Now let's take a look at today's gospel. Somewhere close, very near to the Sea of Galilee, some of you will remember, there is a stone that sticks up out of the ground. It's not very tall, maybe about waist tall, but it's huge. I mean, it looks like a big table that's sitting there. Right in front of the stone, there's a mosaic made from various shades of brown, as I remember. There might be a little bit of blue in it, but it's mostly brown. And it's a basket, and in the basket there's 5 loaves, and to one side of the basket there's a fish, and to the other side of the basket there's a fish. And it's about the size of an altar top, but it's built into the ground.
It was discovered there by, I think, the Byzantines, and they sort of redid it or built into pieces. And they believed that to be the place where Jesus multiplied the fishes and loaves. That someone knew that that was the place and built this mosaic in front of this stone. Now, over top of that stone today is the Byzantine Church. In the Holy Land, they don't put up historic markers to say this happened here. They just go to church. And so over top of that stone, jutting right out of the floor, Pam, you remember, right? It's this stone that comes right up out of the floor, and goes over, and there's an altar rail around it. So when you take communion, you kneel at the altar rail and take it right in front of this stone. And many preachers on this day will draw the analogy of the fishes and loaves to the Eucharistic mystery. In the commentaries that I read this week, and in my own homiletics, what I taught homiletics, I always caution preachers not to go there, because I think today's gospel tells us so much about who Jesus is and who we are, that we should pay attention to that and not talk about the Eucharistic mystery that sort of happens with the fishes and loaves. Like, he took bread, offered it to God, blessed it, distributed it, and there was enough for everyone. And it fed everyone. But instead, let us look at today's gospel from maybe a different slant. Let's look at it not through the eyes of the stomach, about how many people were fed or kind of what happened there, or not through the eyes of what we might call faith in the Eucharistic mystery. But let's look at it from a very practical piece first. I want you to take a look at all the different facets of today's gospel and try to figure out where you fit in there. For instance, are you a little boy who would just gladly share your sack lunch? Are you Andrew, who has a really good idea and says, hey, there's this little boy over there that has a sack lunch? And then people look at you like you got two heads, to go to use that sack lunch to feed 5,000 people, and you say, yeah, but, what's that among all these people, right? Or are you like Philip, who says, this is going to cost too much. We can't do this. It's just going to cost us way too much money. This is the only miracle that's talked about in all four Gospels. And John he puts his own little nuance there. He talks about this little boy's sack lunch, which I think is really important. Particularly knowing what the little boy has in it. 5 barley loaves. Barley was not eaten by the rich. The rich had wheat. They didn't make their bread from barley. The poor always made their bread from barley. And barley loaves are dark. I don't know if you've ever eaten barley bread, but it's really dark. It's almost like if you mix molasses with wheat. It's that kind of dark. It's almost black, really. And scholars tell us that the 2 fishes the little boy had was probably the size of anchovies. It was probably the size of anchovies that was kind of mashed up so that the bread could be dipped in them. Others will tell you that it was about the size of a sardine. There's not a single scholar out there that will tell you that it was like, our brown trout or a largemouth bass. It was not that kind of fish because the little boy was poor. We know the little boy was poor because of the barley loaves, and we know that he could not have had a large fish. So Jesus says to Andrew, go over there and get this little boy's sack lunch. Now the miracle, I think, in this is that, one, that the little boy turned it over. If I had been that little boy and someone came to me and said, look, I need your lunch, and it was noon, I would say, look, you're not getting my lunch. Well, Jesus, I don't care who needs it. I need it. I'm poor. I may not get the next meal. Go find somebody else's. And while you laugh, you would have done the same thing. If you think about it. Think about the times in your life when you only had 2 fish and 5 loaves. I remember those. I remember those times when I didn't have to decide what I was going to eat for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It was right after I had graduated from college and got my first job, and I would come home and I would eat bacon, which is a staple of every Southerner, and beans for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. And I did that for a little over a month until I got my first paycheck. And I thought, whoa, this is great. I can have eggs and bacon and beans. And I ate that for the longest time. Right? You remember those times in your life when there was just loaves and fish. It may have been a divorce. It may have been the death of a parent or a grandparent. It may have been the death of a spouse. It may have been the times when you had planned something really good that just didn't happen, and you felt like the only thing you had was what was with you. 5 loaves and 2 fish. The bare minimum to survive. And when I think about that time, I really think, and I've told Julie this recently, I said, that was the best time in my life. I didn't have to worry about what I was going to eat for supper. Which is the biggest conversation Julie and I have in a day. Before she leaves in the morning, she'll say, is it your turn or my turn to cook? And we'll decide that. And then she'll say, so what do you want? What are you going to make? I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. Well, text me when you know. Well, text me when you know. And then we both come home from work and we look at each other and say, what do you want for supper? I don't know. Right? That was a decision I did not have to make when I was eating bacon and beans. It was there. It was my fish and loaves. I came in, I sat down, I gave thanks, and I ate them. And really, when I look back, it was some of the best times of my life. Honestly. Life was simple then. And think about the times when, and this happens, I wish I didn't have to say this, but it happens all the time in the church. With any meeting we ever have, well, it doesn't in the Episcopal Church, it probably doesn't with the Presbyterian, which I'll check this out, right? So every time we have a meeting, we sit down and say, look at this mission we could do. Somebody says, can we afford it? Now, that we Episcopalians do that all the time. Our Presbyterian brothers and sisters probably don't. They have more faith, I think, than us. Yeah. And that happens all the time. All the time. Rather than to say, what is it that God's calling us to? We say, we can't do this. How much is it going to cost? Well, that costs way too much. Is there any way we can pare it down? Can we get a grant? Can we have someone come in here and do it for us? And we will push off the gospel for as long as we possibly can until the gospel overtakes us. I remember the very first church I served, a beautiful little church. Well, it was a beautiful church when it existed in Eastern Kentucky. I stayed there 12 years. I had nothing to do with closing. It closed long after I left. But the very first thing I brought to the congregation, we only had 9 people worshiping there regularly. And more than half of them were on the vestry. And they were related to each other. So the rule of, how husbands and wives can't serve, that was just thrown out the door. We wouldn't have the vestry if that was the case, right? And it was a parish. It was not a little mission. It was a parish church, and so we governed ourselves. And so the mayor and the minister from the Methodist Church came to me and said, we need to get rid of the pantry. They had run for eons, and we just don't have the people do it anymore, and you have the perfect location. I was wondering if you could do it. And I thought, well, that's great. They fed 200 families a month, and they would show up and they would get their groceries and they'd go home, and I thought, yes, we can do this. This is going to be great. So I go before these 9 people and I say, guess what I've got for you? And I tell them the story about it, and they look at me like I have 2 heads. And they say to me, how can 9 people do that? And I said, well, I don't know. And so they tried to convince me in the first meeting that we shouldn't do it because there's not enough of us. That we don't have the money to buy the food. That we're an aging congregation, that we can't go and haul the food and put it in the pantry. And by the way, where will we put a pantry on this property? Well, after about 3 or 4 of those sessions, I said, I want to change today's conversation. I want you to tell me what parts of the gospel that you want to live up to while I'm here. So that I don't walk into this problem again, because I was really excited about this pantry. Because Jesus says that we are to feed those who are hungry. But if that's not what you, if that's a part of the gospel you want to give away to somebody else, then let me know what the rules are, so that I don't come and make this mistake again. And then all of a sudden, shoes became an interesting topic of people looking. And finally, somebody said, "Well, what if we just do it, and we'll figure out all this later?" I said, "Well, where are we going to put it?" Exactly what they had asked me 2 or 3 weeks earlier. It happened that we had a little storage building. It was probably not much bigger than the little shed we built for Bill in the winter. And it was full of stuff that we never really used. We just kind of filled it up so we could have something to say that we put in the storage building. And so we took it all out, threw it away, and made a little grocery store. And people could come in and shop for their groceries. And there was canned goods and macaroni and dried beans and whatever you wanted. And we bought a freezer to go there so people could look in it, and if there was a turkey or a chicken or whatever was there, they could take that as well. And you came in and shopped yourself. When you came in, we asked you how large your family was, and we gave you a shopping list. And you went around, and it would tell you if you had, 4 people, you were allowed 3 cans of corn, for instance, and 3 cans of beans. And so you would shop and bring it back, turn in your card, load your groceries up, and go. And we serve 200 families a month. And I wondered last night when I thought about this sermon illustration if that pantry was still going since the church had closed. So I Googled it. And the pantry is still going. In fact, it's still run by the Episcopal Church. There's only 4 people now in that little church. And they're still feeding people. So what's my point? What is the point about this? I think God only ever asks for what we already have. I don't think that God says, okay, I want you to do this, and I want you to go out and raise the money for it and get donations to build it and then try to get people to work in it. And God says, look, you have 2 fish and 5 loaves. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to keep it like Johnny Ross would if he was asked for it? Or are you going to offer it to God so that God can do something with it? Are you going to have a great idea that says, wait a minute, there's a sack lunch out there. And then when people look at you like you're crazy, say, well, that probably won't work. What's that among all these people? Or are you going to have the vision or the imagination to do something with it? And I think there's where Jesus is different than anybody else that appears in the gospel. Maybe except the little boy. Maybe the little boy had a vision. Maybe the little boy thought, if I trade this in, I will be able to eat and maybe even able to get some of the food that's left in the basket to take home to my family. I doubt it. But maybe he thought that. But Jesus' imagination of taking what was there and distributing that really changed people's lives so much that they wanted to seize him and make him their king. Some scholars will tell you that the fish and loaves miracle is like stone soup, if you're familiar with that childhood story, where everybody has something, and when you pass it around in a basket, they take what they need, they put in what they don't, and then everybody gets fed. I tend to believe that's true. I tend to believe that it was like a stone soup miracle. And I'll tell you why. Could God take 2 fish and 5 loaves and feed all of Scottsville? Yes. Could God have taken 2 fish and 5 loaves and fed 5,000, what Matthew and Mark say men in addition to the women? Yes. But what is more difficult for God? What is the most difficult thing for God to do? Multiply fishes and loaves or change the human heart? I tend to believe that the most difficult miracle for God is to change the human heart. For in changing the human heart, you change the world. Really. You don't change one person, you change a host of people. When the little boy decided to give his lunch away, not only did it change the little boy, it changed several hundreds, maybe even thousands of people gathered there. When Jesus' imagination took over, and so we can feed all these people with just this little bit. I think the most difficult thing God ever had to do in God's holy life is to deal with our own hearts. To tell us you always have enough. And I always love you enough. And regardless of what you think of yourself, or your little tiny church, or the tent you meet in, or the car you drive, that's enough. You offer it to me, and we can do something with it. But hoard it. Hang on to it. And it just sits there and wastes away. It seems to be like, in thinking about today's lesson, I thought of a time when I woke up late on a Saturday for breakfast, and my grandmother would make these big breakfasts all the time, but on Saturday it was a huge breakfast. And, people, members of the family would drop by, the neighborhood would drop by and eat with us. I mean, it was just a big deal. And I woke up a little bit late, but there was 20 biscuits, and I put them on my plate, and then when I asked for the gravy, my brother, who had also slept late, was at the table and got it before me, and it was almost all gone. And I saw this plate full of gravy on his, in front of him, and I said, "Hey, Bub, what about giving me some of that gravy?" And he said, "No, I can't do that." He said, "I've got just enough here for me." And he said, "In fact, Johnny, I'm taking small bites so that I can have enough for myself." I'm wondering, and this is not to say anything bad about my brother. I bet you he ended up giving me some of his gravy. He's just that way. But I wonder if we don't behave like that first. I'm going to keep what I've got, and I'm going to take small bites so I can have enough to last, I don't know, the average lifespan of a human male, 82 years. Or, this is all I've got for the week. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to hoard it, and this is all I'm eating. This is all I'm getting. I'm not giving anything else. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about how we live our lives, right? I can also tell you that one of the most rewarding meals I have ever had was when my wife came home from college and I had baked beans and bacon. Because she still had about a semester and a half to go, and we didn't get to see each other a whole lot. I would drive to see her on the weekend. She would drive home sometimes. But she didn't care what she was eating, and neither did I. I didn't care if the plate was full, half full, almost empty. It just didn't matter. She was there, and I was there, and that's all that mattered. And I'm wondering if life isn't just that way. When our heart really changes, when we do something imaginative, we step out of the box, we let love act first. I wonder if that's the way that we're supposed to live. Just as this pandemic started, Kevin called me, and we had a conversation about, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? And, then we ended up doing this, which I think was a fishes and loaves moment. We took what we had, both of us together. We were the little boy and our sack lunch. We put the sack lunch together, and we came up with what we've been doing for the whole pandemic. But another fishes and loaves moment was when I didn't know quite what to do in Caledonia, because it's a very small congregation, and we don't have, a bill or or anybody else that will do technology there, really. Paul can do it sometimes, and I can do it sometimes, but not consistently. And I got a call from this guy who has a little business in Caledonia. He says, "Hey, Johnny, my name is Brad. I have this little video business. I'm wondering if during the pandemic maybe I can come and broadcast your services." And guess what my response was? It was like Philip. I said, "Well, Brad, we're a little church. We don't have a lot of money. So I don't know that we could do that. That's a good idea, but we just can't afford it." He said, "No, I'm talking about giving it to you. I'm talking about just doing it as a service for the community. So that if the community wanted to tune in to church service on Sunday, they would have somebody." And I said, "Like, are you serious?" And he's been doing that nearly every single Sunday. Well, they had a baby, so he had to miss for that. And he woke up with his basement filled with water, and he had to miss for that. But he's been doing it every single Sunday. So the community could have more than just enough. Think about the fishes and loaves moments in your own life. And think about how you offered those or didn't, and how that turned out for you. In small churches, we don't have to think very long about those things. We have fishes and loaves moments every time we sit down for a meeting, right? That's just the way we operate, because we have to. And then look what God does with them. So, this week, as you go about your week, not only think about the fishes and loaves moments that were, think about the fishes and loaves moments that are. And what little bit is there that will feed a multitude? Maybe not just with food, maybe with a relationship. Maybe not with food and relationships. Maybe it's just a card. Maybe it's just a prayer shawl. Maybe it's some vegetables that's given to you by a farmer, or a puzzle that is loaned to you from a friend, or one given to you as a gift. You see, fishes and loaves are not a whole lot of stuff, particularly if you think about the little boy and how poor he is. But Jesus' imagination is, it doesn't take a lot to change the world. It doesn't take a whole lot of stuff. It just takes adjusting the heart to see and experience the imagination of God. I pray that you will see that this week. I pray that you will see those moments the rest of your life. And I pray that I'll be here to share those with you and mine with you. Let us join in the hymn, "Praise Thou the Bread of Life." Its full hymn is printed in your book. Amen.
Would you join me together in the responsive prayers of the people? Jesus Christ, you traveled through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made well. Heal those who are sick with the virus. Heal us from our fear. Heal us from our pride. Jesus Christ, healer of all, stay by our side in this time of uncertainty and sorrow. Be with those who have died from the loss of breath by virus or by human hands. Be with the families of those who are sick or have died. As they worry and grieve, defend them from illness and despair. Be with the doctors, nurses, researchers, and all medical professionals who seek to heal and help those affected by the pandemic and who put themselves at risk in the process. Be with the leaders of all nations and those entrusted with the safety of our communities. Whether we are home or about, surrounded by people suffering or watching the latest updates in isolation, Lord, we especially pray for those we now name in voice or the silence of our hearts. As we lift up Chance, Ruth, Karen, and then John, Maurice, Diane, the Morrison family, Katie, Libby, Carol. Are there those celebrating birthdays? Oh, happy birthday! Happy birthday, Ron! Yeah. Tomorrow. Ron is a former pastor of Union. And with his wife. Happy birthday, Ron. Good to have you here. Happy birthday. Anniversaries. Are we celebrating anniversaries this week? Well, may God be with Ron and Linda as you help him celebrate. May God be with all of those who are finding cause to celebrate special days in their life. Jesus Christ, stay with us as we endure this and this in place of our anxiety because of Jesus Christ. And let us pray together the prayer that the Lord taught us saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. sing together our closing hymn, If Thou But Trust in God to Guide Thee. Friends, as we go from this place, we go with the fish and the loaves that we have. They may be the money that we have, the food, they may be the clothes that we have. They are also the time, the energy, patience, all of what we bring with us to put at God's disposal. Remember as we go that we do not simply give these things away, we give these things into. We don't give them away to somebody else, we give them into the relationship. We give them into the community. What will you give of your fish and loaves into community this week? Know that God guides you, and that the Spirit of Christ goes with you in the giving and in the gift. And be at peace. The peace of Christ be with you all now and always. Amen. I do have two quick announcements for us. One of them is that we have some refreshments again today. They are pre-packaged, so we don't need to worry about cross-touching. You're welcome to stay. We'll have the table up with those on it in just a moment. Stay and enjoy some of those if you would like to. Feel free to come out of the vehicles. Try to maintain that 6-foot distancing if you're able. The other thing is that at 2 o'clock today, another worshiping community that I pastor called Companions on the Way is having a sensory forest walk over at Alaska Park. And so we take a loop around the park and we talk about where God is in creation and how we can be attentive to different senses that we have, one at a time, and using those senses to experience God in creation. So if anybody is interested, feel free to join us at 2 o'clock at the parking lot in Alaska Park. Peace, friends. Thank you.
Yeah.
Things good? See ya. It's gonna be. Yeah, I was quite
It was time. Yes. Yes. Well, I could shut down
She said that they stay at her house every single night. Including a doctor's appointment. A doctor up here.
Great. I gotta check with, I'll go check with Lori to see if.
Hey, very cold.
I wondered if
I heard you.
He was, George Street was.
I did not hear you.
George Strait was
Yeah. Hi there.
Looking great. I like the south side stuff.
He never went. Are they open?
We're not dining.
Whatever morning it was. Well, you know, football starts at 1 and they don't end until 11:30 at night.
Get the stew going or whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you gotta be ready to sit down there and order something.
Well, I do shopping every Saturday. Buy that. By the way.
Gotta go to the liquor store, the beer store. What do you need us to get for you? We can get anything you want.